Maniacs, welcome back to the channel. Your local bedhead here. We are going to be diving into another side-eye guy video, and this is actually going to be kind of interesting because I'm actually kind of curious to hear more people's opinions on this because me, myself, and I've been actually thinking, like, is Annabelle really haunted? Because besides the incident or the story that Ed Warren told about the doll, to my knowledge, there isn't a whole lot of documented real evidence that the doll was ever haunted. Just all we went off of was Ed's story and Lorraine's suspicions about it. To my knowledge, I don't think we have any actual physical proof that the doll's haunted. You know, the story that Ed told about how, like, the boyfriend came over and started insulting Annabelle, and then he got into a motorcycle accident and died. I don't know who the real people were involved with that situation, and if you guys have that real information, and please leave a comment down below. But other than that, I really don't know if there's anything that really proves that Annabelle is haunted. Hell, Overnight went there and barely caught anything that was remotely paranormal about Annabelle. The only thing we really got going for is the Conjuring series that really make it kind of come off like it could be potentially haunted. And I'm not sure if I'm, like, putting myself at risk by saying all this stuff. I just don't know. However, I just don't know. So I'm curious to know your guys' opinions down below, of course, but I'm curious to also hear Side-Eye Guy's personal thoughts, because he does his research and stuff, so I'm wondering if he found something out. New information discovered. Ed and Lorraine Warren's haunted Annabelle doll. This shocked me. So let's go ahead and hear what he has to say. Are you haunted, Annabelle?
Hello, everybody. I am joined by Stevie of the Truth or Demons podcast. Stevie joined me a little while back where we talked about the Devil Made Me Do It case and the Warrens' involvement, especially. Stevie is very well versed in all things the Warrens, and I'm very interested to hear her thoughts today because we are going to talk about the infamous Annabelle doll. Towards the end of the video I did with the Devil Made Me Do It case, I asked you guys if you wanted to hear from Stevie again, and you all said yes, because you probably agree with me, Stevie's very well versed and very knowledgeable and done a lot of research on all things about the Warrens. So I'm very interested to hear what she has to say about the Annabelle doll. Stevie, thank you very much for joining me today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to talk about this today.
Yeah, you and me both. So before we kick off with Annabelle, I just want to talk about the sheer number of artifacts, or as I call it, junk, that are in the Warrens' basement, in what, for want of a better, what they call it, a
I
museum.
mean, I guess if you don't believe in all of that stuff about the Warrens and stuff, I mean, it's really easy to kind of feel like that whatever they probably have in their basement is probably nothing more than just stuff to look spooky. And in some cases, it kind of does come off that way. Like, for example, they have like a skull in there with like pink in its eyes, and I mean, stuff that really looks like Halloween decorations. I mean, there are quite a bit of it. Not saying Halloween decorations can't be haunted, but they got a lot of that stuff. And there are some genuinely, like, almost, it looks like put together stuff that was intentionally supposed to look like it was meant to be scary for people to go in there and be like, oh yeah, if I ever saw that in a house, I'd be freaked out by it. So I get that. I do. I genuinely think the stuff still looks cool. I'm a nerd like that, though. I genuinely find stuff like that kind of cool. So I guess it'd be, I mean, if they were to have a yard sale, I'd be there in a second. That's all I'm saying.
For anyone who's not sure what I'm talking about, I'll put a couple of images up here, and you can see the sheer number of just things.
Yeah. First things that crossed my mind, of course, are the Halloween mask back there, devil mask, and some crazy guy screaming mask. This tiger, this gargoyle, that skull on the wall. See that skull over there? I might probably show you with the mouse right over here. This skull is what I was talking about. I'm not sure if it's haunted. It's just stuff. It's a picture of Entertainment Weekly too.
Items that are littered all around all the shelves and every nook and cranny of the basement. Um, Stevie, is there anybody that we know of that has ever come forward to confirm that the Warrens took these items from them? Anyone to confirm that any of these items are in fact haunted by a spirit or a demon or whatever?
To my knowledge, no, I have not heard anybody come forward and confirm. I've not heard Tony and Lorraine or any of the members of Nesper say they heard anybody confirm. It's always just the team members saying just Tony. They say the families don't want to be known, stuff like that, to kind of get around that.
Very
What I
convenient.
hear more, yeah, and what I hear
Yeah.
more than people saying, then more than confirming, is people saying that they know a lot of these items were picked up at antique shops or, a flea market or taken randomly from people and then a story was slapped on it. So there's several items I've heard of where,
Which, if we go by the Amityville horse situation, where Ed said to make it more spooky and scary, right? It kind of feels like that would not be all too shocking to think that this guy is also somebody who would go to a flea market, see my, I don't know, he'd see my Jason Voorhees mug and be like, oh, we can really, there's blood on it and stuff. We can really do something with that there. Maybe the guy who was drinking out of it, he died of a heart attack and maybe he drops it on the floor and it shatters and he kind of puts it back together with tape and he's like, yeah, it's still like taped up from when he dropped it and broke it and it's still, like if you look right here, you can actually see his like the fragments of where his lips touched the cup, right? I mean, they could literally make up a story like that, and people will buy it. That's just the thing. He's a marketsman. He's a salesman. And look, do I feel a little bit weird talking about it, especially years after they all both passed away? Yes, to a degree, it feels a little bit weird. But honestly, it's one of those things, and this is why I always tell you, if you're gonna try to put yourself out in the public's eye, be as honest as you can be. Be an honest person, and this shit won't come back and bite you in the ass. Because unfortunately, because we have debunkers, because we have people who will put in the time to actually do their research and actually bring up stuff that might not have been brought to the light before, we now have this happening. And look, it's gonna happen, guys. And if it did happen, if these people were in fact, let's say, con artists, and we have the proof to prove it, then maybe we should bring it up to the light. Maybe we should let people know that, hey, it wasn't legit. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's the truth of the matter. It's not like it's a bad thing to know the truth. It is the truth. No matter how, horrible it might come off to hear, nobody wanted to ever acknowledge that Ed and Lorraine Warren might have actually taken advantage of people or conned people. But unfortunately, it's kind of beginning to sound like that. It's kind of beginning to sound like that, oh, a lot of conveniences were there. No family wanted to step up and claim any of these items. And I'm sure that some of them are probably still alive today. I just have no doubt in my mind, right? Like the Perrin family. They're alive. A lot of them are. They can back up their story. There should be others. Some things just don't make any sense. And look, I'm not just going to take the word for it. I got to have proof. And I'm beginning to get more and more to that point where I'm like, if you don't have the proof to back it up, I can't just take your word for it. Anybody can make up a story. I can make up a story. This Bulbasaur hat used to belong to a hardcore Pokemon fan. And, I don't know, let's make up some really dark, crazy story. I don't know, he blew his brains out and the hat, miraculously didn't get any blood on it. And now it's just, I wear it every day. Right? You can make up anything. And that's the unfortunate thing. And unfortunately, these con artists are aware that there are people in the world like myself, like a lot of people who are fascinated by this, and they take advantage of it. They completely go full forward and full throttle on it, and they take complete advantage. They get publicity, they get money, they get a lot of stuff. Even if they say we don't charge the people, there is something to gain from it. There is always something to gain from it. The Warrens are one of the most profound, well-known paranormal investigators of all time now, because of the years they put together with what they were doing. So they gained a lot.
they're in the museum and they have some demonic story, and it's as innocent as taking it from a school science lab.
I do find it quite, like a very convenient thing to sort of say, oh, the families don't want to talk about it, because I can understand that may be the case for a certain proportion of people that they may have dealt with. But again, the shit, like we're talking hundreds, if not thousands of items in that. You would have thought some of those people would be, because we do know of hauntings that have happened, and families do come forward and talk about their experience. They write books about it. They do interviews about it. They do talk about their experiences. So to kind of say not one person from the
thousands,
incredible number of items in that basement do not want to talk about it, I do struggle to believe.
I agree. And then the fact that you have so many people that are saying otherwise, that they're not haunted, and this is where they actually came from.
Stevie, let's start off with Annabelle and the Annabelle's backstory, which I'm not sure how many people watching this are well aware. of the backstory, and which version of the backstory we're going to go with here, because it has, as Stevie mentioned to me earlier, it has changed many times, and she will, elaborate on this. So, what is the alleged backstory of Annabelle?
Okay, so if you look back to the first documented telling of the story, I originally thought it was in the 1980 book, The Demonologist. In chapter 3, it's all about Annabelle, her story, how they acquired her, talks about the nurses' experiences. It was a woman, two nurses. One nurse owned the doll, and the other nurse was the roommate. And then they had one of them had a fiance that was also around for it. So you had three people that are saying this doll is haunted. One's having dreams about him.
Yep.
They're finding there's notes written, and
They had a dream. Apparently, the guy had a dream while sleeping on the couch that Annabelle came over to him and started strangling him and terrified him.
don't have this sort of paper, and then they're finding the doll in weird positions, and that stays pretty consistent. The changes are, so that 1980 book version was what I thought was the first telling, but then I found a newspaper article that's supposedly from 1975. It's not, I can't find the date on the article itself, but the author, I did speak to her, and
Wow.
she has told me it was from 1975. So that would have been before the 1980 book publication. And the story is very similar, but there's minor changes that kind of stood out to me, but I don't think would anybody else. Like, so for example, Ed tells the story in the book one way, and then Ed tells the story on YouTube on Tony's channel that they did a different way. And he says things like Annabelle was a ghost and she was from before the apartment building existed, and now she's just in the apartment because that's where the area she died. And then in the video, when he's being interviewed about it, he says, no, Annabelle Higgins, he's got a whole name for her, says it was a little girl, 6 or 7 year little girl that died in a car accident in front of the building. So you have those two variations, and then you have just like so one of the things that stood out to me most that I don't think other people really picked up on was in the article in the newspaper, they talk about how Annabelle slashed the man. He had psychic slashes, is what they called them, on his body. And in the newspaper article, it says body. In the book, it says chest. And then sometimes whoever's retelling the story, whoever, if it's like Tony or it's Ed or somebody related to them, they'll say the back was slashed. So the details are not consistent.
I always find it interesting what exactly a psychic slash really is. I think I've heard Tony mention that before, actually, like psychic wounds and psychic slashes.
Psychic wounds appeared on his chest and on his stomach. 4 this way and 3 this way. They came through his t-shirt. It's like somebody took a scalpel and they could see the blood coming through the t-shirt.
So the story we have is that it was like obtained by a couple of nurses. And for the longest time, I think I have been guilty of saying this.
I'm going to go ahead and say, and I don't mean to pause side-eye guy, I have a lot of respect for the man. I do find it a bit odd that you would completely change the story so many times to the point of, inconsistency. Okay, was it the chest? Was it the stomach? Was it the back? Make up your mind. How hard is it to make up? How hard is it to get one thing down? And I think psychic slashes are kind of like, or supposedly the doll did it with its mind. So it just appeared out of nowhere. Nothing was there, but the doll was like using its mind to slash the guy or something along those lines.
I didn't believe those nurses ever existed. And
right, same.
Yeah, you too as well. But what I find quite interesting is that you may well have actually discovered that, and to be fair, like it's not an out and out Warren's hit piece here. If we find this information, I think it's only fair to present it as the way you found it. You may well have found or discovered one of these nurses.
Yes, I believe I did. I really think so. She did not confirm directly. It was more indirectly, but we got confirmation, and as far as we can tell, it really is her, and she's the only one left living. I did locate the other woman and the man, and they're both deceased from the records I found, but I found names that match them. The nurse thing is real. I found evidence of them both being nurses and nurses students in that time period. The man was apparently engaged to one of them, but I don't have any information past that, like if they got married or anything. It didn't seem like they were. The last names didn't line up for a marriage, and there wasn't any record of a marriage. So I do think they split, which makes me wonder if they all didn't stay in touch over the years, and that's why no one ever talked about it.
Can you just explain the evidence you have that they did have Annabelle?
Right. Okay. So I had an anonymous tip tell me the woman had a last name change because I could not find her anywhere. As far as I found the friend and the man, but I couldn't find the woman who claimed to own Annabelle until someone sent me her new last name, and then I instantly found her on Facebook. And then when I found her on Facebook,
That's my
all of a
doll.
sudden I kind of felt like I was being messed with because it all kind of happened really quickly. As soon as I found her, she started commenting on some Facebook posts about Annabelle and said outright
I agree.
Annabelle's doll belonged to her. Or
I agree. I am the owner of Annabelle, so went through a lot. But after seeing that documentary and reading the chapter in the book about us and the events, I'm now a little skeptical. Many things were changed, but I owe them a lot for getting that doll away from us. Wow. So it does kind of sound like if this is really her, and they do believe this is her, sounds like they changed up the story quite a bit, and maybe even hinting at the idea that the Warrens might have even played on their psyche to make them think that this doll was more haunted than it really was. I feel like that's what I'm kind of getting at when she says I am now a little skeptical. Maybe because they were telling them things that just simply were not true. So is like Annabelle really the spirit of a little girl that died at that place? I don't know. More than likely, probably not.
the Annabelle doll did belong to her. And she also said Hollywood makes up a lot of stuff, but she did not engage with us further. She didn't elaborate on that, and she kind of just ghosted us after that.
So do we actually have documentation or any kind of evidence that they ever met the Warrens?
Okay, so kind of. When I found that newspaper article, I found it via another Facebook page. I've had a lot of people tag me and share stuff, and so it's been really helpful to find all these random things that pop up, and the newspaper article being one of them. And so first of all, I needed to find the paper it came from, because my initial thought was it was a tabloid. I did not believe it was the legitimate newspaper article, because the Warrens have lots and lots of posters and just like these things in the museum showing off the different things, and they all kind of seem like tabloid type articles. So I could not find any evidence of a newspaper it came from. Instead of that, I found the author that wrote it. She's actually still around and still working, and agreed to an interview.
Oh
So
my
I
God.
spoke with her, and she confirmed for me that she did sit with Ed and Lorraine to discuss with the nurses their story so she could write it for the newspaper.
That's a pretty good second.
Wow. Okay. Well, that is very interesting.
Yeah.
We do have to kind of like explain here, like whatever evidence or circumstantial or whatever it might be, that there is an actual connection between these nurses and Elaine Warren. It still doesn't say anything about the claims of the doll being haunted, of course. But
Right.
that is interesting, because for the longest time, I just thought that whole story was nonsense.
I did too, because why wouldn't these people come forward, especially with all the money that's coming in now for the films? And it didn't make any sense at all. And then also to learn that they do exist, but still don't want to be in the limelight for it. So that's very interesting to me. And also, the nurses weren't the ones who contacted the newspaper. The woman who wrote the article said Ed and Lorraine contacted her, and not at first for this article. The first time they contacted her was to write what she called a puff piece on them as paranormal investigators.
That's fascinating. Okay, that really is interesting. Can you kind of give me some of the examples of people that have come forward to say that, oh, I had this experience with Annabelle? I did a video where overnight visited the Warrens' basement with Tony Sapera, and some of the things Tony says is just, as far as I'm concerned, complete and utter nonsense. There's one where he says that someone took a photograph of Annabelle, and behind her, like,
Yeah, and there was no proof of it. They always do that. Yeah, someone took a picture of Annabelle. It's like, okay, why didn't you ask for the photo? Why didn't you ask for a copy of it so you could show people? But now we have to take your word for it that it really happened. That's just not good enough to me. That's bullshit. You're supposed to document this stuff, but you didn't. You didn't take any evidence. It just bothers the hell out of me.
eyes were real eyes. Which,
Yeah.
yeah, so I've heard that one. But can you explain some of the more famous ones? There's one in particular that's pretty famous.
Mhm.
You explain that?
So the funny thing about that one, yeah, that is the only one aside from all the content creators. And the story goes that a man and his girlfriend were visiting the museum because it used to be open to visitors, and then Lorraine would, hang out, answer questions, let people kind of browse around and experience it. And supposedly this man and his girlfriend didn't believe in the story of Annabelle and stood at her case, tapped on the case a few times, mocked her, said, hey, if you're real, do something, prove you're real, kind of antagonizing her. And so Ed put a stop to it. They told him, you can't be doing that. You got to leave, get out of here. And so they leave. And on their way out, apparently they wreck and have a horrific motorcycle
The
accident.
guy dies.
The man dies instantly, hitting a tree, according to the story. And the woman survives, but spends a year in the hospital. And that's a quote from Lorraine. She actually says in an interview that the woman spent a year in the hospital. So that's the only evidence we have is the story. We don't have the woman. We don't have a record of the motorcycle accident. We don't have a record of a woman being hospitalized after a horrific motorcycle accident. These things.
And you would have evidence. It would be in the newspaper. It would be somewhere. Hell, accidents happen around here all the time, and there's always something on it. It would have been documented, but apparently it was never documented. That kind of tells me it was probably a lie. And I hate calling people liars, especially people who are just gone now. But that does come off like a very interesting story to tell people not to challenge Annabelle because it's probably just a normal doll. That's a bummer. I was curious about that because people were telling me like there's no documentation. And I'm like, oh, there has to be something out there. But this person apparently does her research very well, and if she's saying that there is no documented evidence, I'm pretty open to believing in it. I believe it.
Would have been documented because at the time, newspapers were social media.
Yep.
People knew everything they knew from newspapers, and newspapers thrived on these stories. So for it not to have any record is really bizarre. So when I did my research on it, I kind of debunked it because since we don't have any other testimony or any other witnesses or whatever, there's nothing else to go on except the lead investigator of NESPR, which is the Warren's organization, the New England Society for Psychic Research. His name is Dan Rivera. And he took it upon himself to start telling people for a couple of years now that he witnessed when he was 8 years old the aftermath of the accident. He says that he was with his father. They saw the motorcycle speed past them, and his dad made a comment that motorcycle's going to wreck. They're going too fast. And then a few minutes later, they get back down the road where they've caught up to where the motorcycle is, and it's wrecked. And he says he saw the woman on the side of the road holding her head, and that there was an accident. And he said specifically it happened when he was 8 years old. The year, he says, and then he says the road it was on. It was this, I think it was Route 25. And so if that's true, there would be records. And so I went digging and I looked for everything I could find on Route 25, any accidents that may have happened. There were a couple motorcycle accidents that I found, but it was always one passenger. And the one fatality was a single passenger, and couldn't find anything. I even contacted local libraries, and they helped me. They reached out to other libraries to see if maybe they had it, because
Nothing.
so they said a lot of their microfilm was at bigger libraries, so they would contact them for me and see if they could find it. Didn't find anything. Then I was on a Facebook group of people who lived in that area during that time, and I put up a post and said, does anybody remember a fatality in a motorcycle accident where the man died and the female passenger survived? And it was on this route at this time period, this date, whatever. Someone commented and said that road was not open to the public until 2 or 3 years after it supposedly this accident.
Oh my God. This is why I have an issue with lying. They treat you like idiots. Jeez Louise. They really thought nobody would actually do this research someday and actually find this information. That is so insulting. Like, I feel like my intelligence has been just questioned. Because unfortunately, I would have believed it. And I did believe it. I believed it happened for a long time until all this information of the Warren started coming out. So the road that he said that they were on when the accident happened didn't even exist to the public at the time. I wonder if she has documentation that proves that it wasn't. I feel like I don't think anybody would lie about that.
supposedly happened. So that
That's
debunks it. If he's so adamant about it being that specific date and time, that's wrong.
You must have been
It's
dreaming.
not true.
that's such. If anyone's ever questioning if Stevie doesn't know her stuff, Stevie knows her stuff. She goes deep.
That's crazy, man.
That's awesome work.
That is.
Thank
Good job.
I
Like, seriously.
really enjoyed it. It was so much fun, especially when the comment pops up, the alert for this comment, and someone's responding to, and you're like, oh my god, what did they say?
Yeah, no, that's so great. I've also heard as well that around the time of the Annabelle doll, kind of like gathering up the fame and the infamy that it has, it's very, very. It's got a lot of similarities to a Twilight Zone episode.
No
Yep.
shit.
And for me, that debunks it as well. It's too similar, and also knowing it was very well known by Ed and his friends and people who knew him that he loved the Twilight Zone show.
Yeah, and I share that in common with him. I love the Twilight Zone too. But like in this episode, it's this was we're talking a long time ago. We're talking about black and white TV here. This is way before Chucky, way before, or Child's Play, should I say, way before a lot of those other things. And it was about a doll that was that came to life. Was this doll was a killer? Was like protecting the child and trying to attack the parents or the mother, and
The stepfather.
The stepfather, excuse me. And then wasn't the mother's name called Annabelle?
No way.
Yes.
No fucking way. No. What? That is almost too coincidental. Oh my god, that is so coincidental. I know I'm going off of this one video, and I know there's not like a whole lot of me sitting down and actually finding this information, but she found a lot of information that would tell me differently already. And maybe I'm, really sticking my neck out, or, really playing with fire here, but I have no reason to believe that Annabelle's a haunted doll. Big fan of Twilight. Watches the show, has an episode with a doll that kills people, and the mother's name is Annabelle. That is just too coincidental.
And the doll was given to the little girl as a birthday gift. And in all the Annabelle stories, the nurse says her mom gave it to her on her birthday.
Yeah, so I think I'd put it this way, I wouldn't put it past Ed and Lorraine Warren to at least take some creative inspiration from the Twilight Zone there.
I agree. And it's not the only example in history of people doing that, of taking a fictional story and trying to create a folklore from it. It's happened so many times. And the more research I do, and the more podcasts I listen to, and they cover every subject known to man, like time travel, people are pulling these stories from newspapers, magazines, wherever they existed when it was obscure, and turning it into folklore.
So, Stevie, one of the big things that we keep hearing from Ed and Lorraine and from Tony is that, you can't touch Annabelle. It has to be kept in this shrine or this hutch, and it has to be doused with holy water. And for a mere human to touch this thing, you're going to be cursed or whatever it might be.
You'll die in a motorcycle accident.
Die in motorcycle accidents, apparently. But this isn't. The trouble is, like, this is what they say now, but they haven't been consistent with this historically.
Yeah.
So do you mind just explaining, like, some of the findings you found with how the Warrens have allowed others to treat and handle Annabelle in the past?
Absolutely. So initially I thought it was only Tony, because they do travel with the doll now for Paracon, and for they're taking her to Gettysburg, and they've traveled with her in the past. I recently discovered, when I met and interviewed the author of that newspaper article, she told me that she asked the Warrens, can she please take the doll with her back to her news studio to get some photos of it for the article. They said, sure, no problem. She loaded it up in the back of her car. She said she remembers looking back in her rearview mirror to see the doll in the back, felt it was a little creepy. That was it. Took it to the news studio, took it back to the Warrens, no issues.
No issue. No car crashes there.
Nope. But every other person who's driven with Annabelle, according to Ed and Lorraine, has had car trouble, including them.
That's brilliant. I also just always found it really funny that Tony's like, has all this. there's a lot of fear mongering, of course, around Annabelle because there has to be. And the more you make people fearful of Annabelle, the less people will want to touch it. But he's got absolutely no problem accepting a bunch of money to take it to Paracon, to take it to Gettysburg, take it to Vegas. He took it to
Something doesn't add up there. I mean, I've had this conversation with my audience several times. Do you think Ed and Lorraine Warren would let this happen as much as he takes this doll out and lets people just look at it and get around it and stuff? We always said no, but now it sounds like they might have if it meant a lot of money coming in. It really is. This is unfortunate, man. This is unfortunate because it really, the stories, the facts, the evidence that they're bringing out, asking people to, really is beginning to sound like it was just nothing but a load of baloney. And that is so unfortunate to hear. I'm beginning to have a reoccurring theme now. First, it was the whole paranormal couple situation, and now going back to Ed and Lorraine Warren and listening to all this stuff come out. How are you only at 24,000 subs? How are you not at 100,000 at this point, man? You're doing amazing work here. You're actually debunking the things that need to be debunked. I love it. I love it. I love it. I think it's fantastic.
For God's sake. If I had something that I really genuinely believed was dangerous to others,
yeah, you wouldn't do it.
Have a moral duty to do my absolute best to keep that away from everybody.
Absolutely. And Ed and Lorraine tried to say that, that was their shtick, but it didn't stick with Tony.
Well, if you really believe
no, exactly. We were just talking about that. Just now, yeah. It was their shtick to make sure people showed the utmost respect for these items and stuff, and that they were always supposed to keep remained inside the museum at all times. I at least give him that credit, right? But this guy is just taking them to cons, and oh yeah, we have a chance to see Annabelle, the crazy haunted doll, like it's a freak show or something. Yeah, give me your money. It just feels like that. It feels like it's become a rodeo with these supposedly dangerous artifacts. It rubbed me the wrong way the first time I heard about it. Like that video when he did overnight, when he grabbed one of these Raggedy Anns and he's like, do you think it's going to have worth more money if I sign it? And he goes ahead and signs his autograph on the back of the doll. It's like whatever you were given in your current situation and status was because of the Warrens. The Warrens basically left you this place. And now you're signing Raggedy Anns and you're taking all these haunted objects to these Comic-Cons and these horror cons, and letting just the overall public see them. I'm not going to tell him how to live his life. I don't know the guy personally. I'm sure he's not going to like anything I just said. But if I had to open up and be honest, I always rubbed me the wrong way, the way he would treat this entire situation. It's one thing to open up the museum for paranormal investigations. That's one thing. But to actually open it up to the public and take all these artifacts. I mean, did you see the way he treated Annabelle when moving it over to another case? How he was so specific and how he was so careful and how he had holy water and he was splashing everywhere all over it. You would think that he would not be doing that, but he is.
If you really genuinely believe that is going to be dangerous to others, someone had some sort of fatal injury or accident or incident or an outright murder, whatever it might happen, you can clearly see that Annabelle's, and then surely then you've got to realize you're comparable to that.
Yeah, exactly. Wouldn't you feel terrible if that result came about? And I mean, you can't deny it's the doll. You've been saying it is.
100%. And if you're paying whatever money you're accepting to flaunt Annabelle around, shouldn't you kind of go, you know what? This is completely and utterly irresponsible if this doll is as dangerous.
Yeah. You're right. You're right.
Or at least Tony and the Warrens themselves. It doesn't. I can't make that make sense.
No, and Zach touched it, right?
Yeah, he did. Zach, Haunted Artifacts or something like that. Deadly Possessions, I think is what the show's called. Yeah, he touched it, and he's like, sorry, I touched the doll, and he shows on camera, he touches Annabelle's foot, and then whatever his name is, grabs the doll, throws it in the suitcase, and just fucking walks out of the building. He just caused such a horrible thing. Ed touched it, and nothing happened to him.
Is that Baggins?
Zach touched Annabelle. Yes, he did. When Tony took the doll to Vegas.
Deadly Possessions.
Oh, did not. No, did he get possessed?
So, right. Look, okay, so it wasn't really addressed in a big way. It was very kind of, they addressed it, but not in a big way. They didn't publicize that they addressed it. Apparently, it caused this huge animosity between Zach and Tony. They both said terrible things about each other. They both called each other greedy. They both, said things, and Zach is fine. He may
Yep.
have been possessed in the moment for his show, but that's typical for Zach's
He had,
show.
yeah, he
but
had
he's
eager to
fine.
touch it.
He's still fine.
Zach has been possessed so many times, and he is doing just fine.
Exactly, yes. And then also, Tony addressed kind of privately, he addressed to the Paracon viewers. He did a little speak thing where he talked to an audience and addressed some questions and stuff. And he brought up how he did make money off of that because people accused him of making money off Annabelle when they were supposed to not make money off of this kind of thing. And his story was he didn't want to take Annabelle, so he kept being pestered by Zach's producers, and he finally said to the producers, okay, hey, if you're really, really serious about this, give me $5,000 of first-class plane tickets and I'll bring her. And he says he thought they would not do that. But I don't believe that. I don't believe that for a second. He tried to
unfortunately, all the stories that Tony is spewing out are just not adding up, unfortunately. I don't want to sit here and say that he's a straight-up liar, but I do think there is some I might as well call him a liar, but I don't think he's being fully honest with his audiences about what happened. If they were pestering me, so I just decided to bring Annabelle. You could have just said no, straight up. It's not happening. Stop. It's not gonna happen no matter how many times you ask me. He could have had that power to do that, but he did it anyways. Yeah, yeah.
Backtrack and cover that for himself, saying, yeah, I did make money, but it was only because they called my bluff.
Stevie, I will say that the doll looks pretty fresh to me. It doesn't look very worn. I understand that some people say, well, it's kept inside this like shrine hutch thing, but you were telling me some hearsay about the Annabelle doll that we now see inside that hutch at the Warrens museum/basement.
So yeah, through my research and talking to different people who have had involvement with the Warrens, who've been to the museum, who have heard their stories, there's so much hearsay I get. And some of it is that the Annabelle that is currently in the Warrens Museum in the case is not the original doll that they collected in 1970, whatever. Apparently, the hearsay states that it's been sold more than once.
No fucking
way. And it
way.
probably sells for a really pretty penny, and they just keep perpetuating that it's the same Annabelle as the...
Okay, I would love for someone to come up and tell us that they have the actual doll. I would love for someone to do that. Say, yep, I purchased it off them. Here's the receipt. I would love that. Oh my God, that'd be fantastic. I mean, that would debunk it right there. 100%. That would debunk the Warrens being honest, and that would be it. Like, that would be it. I wouldn't know what else to say. That is fucking nuts. This entire time, that might not have even been in real Annabelle. Well, that'd explain why there's no activity happening around it. Barely anything happens at all. Even when Over and I went there, nothing really happened with it. That would explain it.
Original.
That's insulting.
I mean, I wouldn't put it past some, like, very wealthy people who just like to collect odd things like this. Just sign some sort of waiver to say, hey, you can never disclose this. You can never.
Exactly.
Of course, we got to stress this is hearsay. We got no evidence to back.
Yeah.
We do have to very much stress that before anyone kind of comes attacking us on that one. We don't know, but
no, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. There's no evidence that it is not the real doll, but I will say that you're right. It would at this point it would not be that crazy to think that maybe that's true. I mean, I'm sure there are other Annabelle dolls that look just like the one that was haunted. 100%. Mine doesn't. Mine's a different style of Raggedy Ann, but it wouldn't be surprising.
No proof.
You go into the Warrens Museum, you go into the house, and you open up a closet, and they have like 500, they have like 40 of them stacked up on top of each other. All right, bring out the new one, put it in there.
Stevie, I found this really interesting. Thank you very much for taking the time to explain some of these myths, and the facts, and the history about Annabelle. I've certainly heard some things I've never heard before. I hope many of the people watching this video have heard some things, and you continue to be like my go-to person when it comes to all things the Warrens.
I love it. Thank you so much for having me. I had a great time. I love sharing this stuff. It's so interesting to me to be able to uncover all this. It's really wild.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe. Please go check out Stevie at Truth or Demons podcast. She also has a YouTube channel. She's going to start uploading more regularly very soon. So please go show her some love and go subscribe and watch her videos. And thank you very much. Cheerio.
I don't know what to say to all that besides, whoa. And I will be checking out her channel. Of course, I'll be leaving a link to both of their channels in the description down below. Now that I'm thinking about all the information I just learned, there could be something there. And I'm taking the nurse's word over the Warren's word at this point. Because, again, the inconsistencies. And Tony is a very interesting guy. I have nothing against Tony, but I got to be honest. I'm an honest guy. It always rubbed me the wrong way. The way he would handle that museum. And where he would take all these items and all these things. If he really felt that these were dangerous, Side-Eye Guy's right on the money. If he really felt that these things were dangerous, and I think I've been saying it myself, then you wouldn't be doing that. You would not be taking them out to the public where people can easily insult the thing without you doing much of anything. I mean, they are basically paying you to have all this stuff there, so you can't just pick them up and take them out without permission. I'm sure there's some sort of something there that has to deal with that. I mean, so you're just allowing people to insult these items and risking their own lives if they are really haunted, if they're really dangerous and they can curse you. What are you doing? Where's your professionalism? Where's your responsibility there? Like, you got to have something. You can't just do this. So, yeah, it is a very interesting conversation to have. I'm kind of 50-50 with the Annabelle doll. Yeah, at one point I would have said 100% believable. Yeah, that could have been paranormal. But now I'm kind of like, where do I lie with this? I'm not going to lie when I say this. I'm leaning more towards the idea that this doll isn't as haunted as people make it out to be. So I did say earlier that I don't believe Annabelle's haunted. But now I'm kind of like in the middle. Now I'm like, I would believe either or. Again, I want to hear the real stories from the nurse. I would love to hear the real stories and everything that happened. But as for the Warren's word, I'm kind of throwing it to the side at this point. I just don't want to really take anything they say right now into consideration. And that's so sad of me to say because I was a big Warrens fan at one point. I loved the Warrens. All this information's coming out, and I really, I have a profound respect for them in a sense, but at the same time, I'm kind of losing that respect, unfortunately. I want to hear what you guys have to say down below. I know my opinion's been inconsistent this entire video, but I have a lot of thinking to do. So keep that in mind. But let me know your personal opinions down below, guys. Hit the like button. Go support the original video. Go subscribe to both channels. Both links will be in the description. And I'll certainly see you guys in the next one. Please do take care.
JCARTSARTS is throwing down, coming after me. If you can't stay, JCARTSARTS is through. You won't be mended.